We okay?
You guys are clear. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our local power year-end review. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day to join our bubble. My name's Dave Mills, and I'm coming to you from Union Bay. And it takes a little while for guests to trickle in. So while we're waiting, I'm just going to quickly run through some slides reviewing the local power campaign this year. That will give folks time to set up, and then I'll get started with an acknowledgement and introductions to our guests, and then we'll get today's panel started. So we ended last year on the local power campaign at the BC Utilities Commission. There, a group of interveners were challenging BC Hydro's attack on home generation. Pictured here is Peter Nix. Peter deserves the lion's share of the credit for getting this campaign started. Despite helping local power supporters send hundreds of letters in opposition, the BCUC turned down interveners' requests to maintain the rate that net metering generators are paid to produce power. This allows people like Peter, who invested some of their life savings in renewable energy, the opportunity to get a fair return on their investment. The Utilities Commission, however, took a different approach to Indigenous generation. At behest of Cabinet, they set about reviewing whether or not Indigenous generators should be regulated the same way as utilities are. And in this case, the BC Utilities Commission tabled recommendations that would allow Indigenous utilities to generate their own power and not only sell energy into the grid within their territories, but to members across the grid. And they made a number of recommendations to Cabinet. And so throughout both those BC Utility Commission inquiries last year, Dogwood supporters got involved, sent letters, and made delegations to the BCUC. So that was how 2019 ended. In 2020, we decided we wanted to get out on the road and take a look at local power across communities across our province. We knew that cities were the only level of government taking action on the climate crisis, and we wanted to see what they were up to. So pictured here is Central Saanich's fire hall. Their upfront investment in panels will pay itself off in 12 years. And over the life expectancy of their installation, they expect to realize $1 million worth of savings. But it wasn't only cities that are starting to lead on the climate crisis. Pictured here is the Slade family residence. Many of you will have been introduced to David through our Facebook and Instagram videos. And this is a family that's currently paying no energy bills. They're virtually decarbonized home generators who power their lives with electricity. Next, we wanted to see what the future looked like. This is a picture of the community of Acam's proposed 40 megawatt solar generation site and its champion, Marty Williams. In a future where we're going to need more energy, we need to get it from somewhere. And it was amazing to get out and see what this future looks like. Then the pandemic hit, but it didn't slow us down. We moved online quickly, hosting a webinar with Melina Labicon-Massimo and Peter Kirby on the breadth and depth and scope and range of Indigenous power projects that are not only occurring across BC, but in fact, right across Canada. A very inspiring webinar attended by hundreds of Dogwood supporters. And then out of nowhere came Bill 17. So if you were paying attention during the dog days of summer, the government introduced an attempt to really radically alter our energy paradigm here in BC. We're by law required to ensure that we can generate all the power we need here at home. However, the prospect of cheap power from California was too tempting to resist, and Dogwood decided to fight back. And thousands of you got involved, sending letters to the government, asking them to withdraw Bill 17, which they did. And you all were right, because only a couple of months later, fires swept across the US West Coast. The grid literally became too hot to move electricity across it. The idea of supplying BC homes with power from California, I think still remains a dream. And then throughout all that time, Dogwood was supporting the efforts of PACE BC. And PACE is the opportunity to finance retrofits and generation installations in your house. We'll hear a bit more about that in today's session. It's basically climate action financing that is going to allow more people to get involved in renewable energy generation and increase household resiliency. And then, of course, where we've ended this year so far is at Site C. We heard the government was set to take a second look at this project, which by all measure is spiraling out of control. It was the right time for Dogwood to get involved, and you agreed. Thousands and thousands of you have stepped up to send letters and sign petitions asking for the government to cancel this project. So that's a quick wrap of the year in local power. Thank you very much for joining Dogwood and our special guests today. I'd like to acknowledge it is my privilege to live and work on unceded Comox territory. Reconciliation is a critical thread to the work that Dogwood does. We're trying the best we can to defend our environment and improve our democracy. The thread that runs through all that is reconciliation. And where I live in Union Bay, I was reminded hauntingly about the ongoing processes of colonization when Terry Glavin wrote in Maclean's magazine about the burial sites of the Pentlatch people that have been unearthed just a kilometer from where I live to make way for housing developments that are coming to communities all over BC. So I invite all of you on this panel to consider what reconciliation means to you. To me, it means returning land and self-governance to unceded Indigenous communities across BC. And I'm really proud that that is something that Dogwood is committed to upholding and undertaking in our work. So with that, I'd like to just take care of a few housekeeping things. If you're having any technical problems today, email Jamie at dogwoodbc.ca. She's going to be our tech support for the day. We're going to go through the introduction of our guests, and then we're going to talk a little bit about decarbonization. We'll take a break to answer a few questions from you. You can leave questions in by using the Q&A function. So if you're on Zoom and looking at your menu at the bottom of the screen, there should be the opportunity to hit a Q&A button. Write any questions that you have in there, and Jamie will get to them when we get our break for questions. If you don't have that Q&A bar showing up, you can leave them in the chat. So with that, I'm pleased to welcome a panel of guests who have taken the time out of their day to help us unpack what local power and decarbonization means in BC. Dogwood supporters will have been introduced to the star of our first local power video, David Slade. It was very popular on Facebook and Instagram. Our journey into this campaign began with an introduction to the community of net metering and solar advocates in the Cowichan Valley. Welcome, David. If you could introduce yourself and tell us what motivated you to make the switch to mostly a fossil fuel-free life.
Thank you very much, David. And thank you to all of the guests that are tuning in from around the province, I imagine. I'm speaking to you from the unceded traditional territories of the Cowichan and Malahat people in what's now known as Cobble Hill. And my journey began about a dozen years ago when I came to realize that we were existing on our planet and in our community in an extremely unsustainable way. Food security was one of the driving forces that caused myself and my wife to buy a small acreage in Cobble Hill and look at ways to become more self-sufficient. And after we did that, we decided that we wanted to design and build a sustainable, energy efficient home. And so we've been in this home for 9 years now. We built it with energy efficiency and net zero in mind, geo-exchange, heat system, in-floor, cob floor radiant heat, triple pane windows. And over a period of several phases, we've added solar energy to our home, starting out with no solar panels for the first 2 years, and then we added 18 panels and then bumped that up to 27 after 2 years, and then after another couple of years we bumped that up to 47 panels altogether. 47 panels put us well above net zero in that we are now charging our full-on electric car and running our home and exporting power into the grid, and at the end finishing the year with a credit. So it's been a journey over many years, and we've learned a lot in that journey, but we have reached a point now where we are still dependent on BC Hydro because they are our battery. We export to them and then import from them when our grid is not producing in the dark, some of the dark days of winter and at night, of course. But we are, I believe, one of the demonstrated the ability of local people to be a key player, multiple key players in local sustainable energy security that would make it so that during periods of grid failure or disruption, there would be local people like myself able to produce and hopefully ultimately store and redistribute energy into our community. And I would like to just add that all of the infrastructure that I have put in, as well as our friend Peter Nix, has all been paid for by ourselves with no subsidies, no rebates, no discounts of any sort. So we are producing electricity locally in a renewable fashion and basically contributing it to the grid for BC Hydro to redistribute.
Thanks, David. You're gonna have to save some of that information for the actual discussion, or else we'll just have to end this whole presentation right now.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I appreciate it. Just before I move on, what motivated you to take this step?
I have always had a really keen interest in science, and I have followed the science of sustainability and climate change, and I realized that the path we're charting is in basically the complete opposite direction of the one we need to chart. I also, in the intervening years, have become a grandparent, and I feel a strong moral obligation to future generations to chart a better path to a future that they will be able to enjoy some of the benefits that we have been able to enjoy. And I think that I realize that I need to take responsibility for the harm that has been done by myself and my generation, and provide a little bit of leadership to show people how they can do it themselves.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And likewise, many of you will be familiar with Marty Williams. Marty's been the feature of one of our more popular blogs on Dogwood News and starred in a video that we ran during the election in the East Kootenays. Marty is a proponent of what could be the largest solar energy project in BC. He's a tireless advocate for the Ktunaxa Nation. Marty, could you tell us a little bit about the community of Akam?
Hisuk Wulfnam. My name is Marty Williams, and I'm from the community of Akam. And in 2011, we ratified our community strategic plan. And within that plan, we have 12 TP poles. And I am the energy champion TP pole holder for my community. I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for having me here and to participate in this venue. And I have been working on this project since 2008, and I'm familiar with the 2010 Clean Energy Act, at which time the province had made efforts to include First Nations through the IPP program. But that project didn't open the doors for solar energy development. Here in my community, in this part of the province, Amakas Tunuka, the homeland of the Tunuka people, we get the most sunlight in BC. It's the most untapped energy resource in the province. And as the energy champion through my research, I see that there's a lot of potential for development here, and our community wants to be regional leaders and regional facilitators of the energy development, the solar energy development in our area. So with that, I'll leave that as my introduction.
Thank you very much, Marty. So our next guest, Muneesh Sharma, and we sit on a steering committee for PACE BC. It's kind of a shadowy group that's been working behind the scenes to convince decision makers that they need to do more to help everyday people unlock their potential to decarbonize. PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. It's a climate action retrofit program. Now, Muneesh, you work with BOMA, and that's probably an unfamiliar acronym to most of the guests here today. BOMA stands for the Building Owners and Managers Association of BC. You're some pretty heavy hitters in the built environment space. So why are you such a strong advocate for climate action financing tools like PACE? And tell us a little bit about what BOMA does.
All right, thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. I represent BOMA BC, which again is the Building Owners and Managers Association of British Columbia. We're the commercial property managers and owners. So we represent about $350, $400 billion worth of properties across BC. And my job is to be the relationship guide between the government and them and following policies and stuff like that. So we work a lot on energy reduction, as we've had a lot of carbon initiatives come up over the last few years. Some of my history is I was on the Mayor's Greenest City Advisory Committee, the Renewable City 2050 committee in Vancouver. Still am, I believe. We at BOMA started District 2030, which is a commitment from property managers to reduce their energy consumption by 50% by the year 2030 from 2007 levels. That's taking place in the Greater Victoria area, in Victoria, Saanich, and probably Langford and more. I'm also on the BC Energy Step Code Council, which was created to help municipalities bring in the new energy step code that the government's working on. And I'll be on the new one for existing buildings. I'm on the City of Vancouver's Urban Design Panel. I've been there for about 6 years. I get to watch every single building that gets, every single big building that gets built and designed, and get to ask questions about how they achieve their goals. Back in government, I was part of the BC government for 9 years. We were the government that brought in the first, world's first carbon tax, the successful one, and carbon reduction targets. So I have a long history of doing things, but my current role is to help businesses out to do what it takes to make sure that the sector is successful in reaching our carbon reduction targets. So I've been part of this group with Dave on PACE BC to look at ways that we can remove what's called the splint incentive, which means there's not a financial incentive for the owners to take on these big projects because they can't recuperate the costs through charging it back to tenants. So an owner who's not sure about what they're going to do with their building doesn't want to take on this whole building retrofit at one time. Even pension funds, who I represent, who represent a lot of people, they won't even take on a project unless there's a payback of about 5 years. So what PACE does is it allows the proponents to take on bigger projects and remove the financing trouble by recovering those costs over a longer period through operational expenses. And that's why our industry favors tools such as PACE. And we're working with the municipalities across BC to look at incentivizing ways to have better things that the municipalities want. There's a revitalization tax credit, which is available now, that's allowed to be focused on things which are beneficial to the communities. So we're working with government through PACE to try and show that we can do it without using the government's own money, and we can get a lot more done this way. Thanks.
Thanks, Muneesh. Who are some of your clients? Help folks just get a sense of the types of clients that you represent.
Our members are like Cadillac Fairview, which is like the Quebec Teachers Fund, Ontario Teachers Fund, that sort of stuff. Those people, big property managers like the BC Pension Fund, is called Quadrille. They manage billions of dollars worth of properties. They're located here in Vancouver, but we also represent third-party owners, so property managers who own properties for foreign people who own property here. Because if you're selling a property right now, sometimes people who are in the market from Asia or from Europe, they buy them up. So what we try to work on is not pushing policies that force these individuals to sell their properties, because when they just sell it, you lose the businesses that are there, which is kind of the fabric of the community. But what also happens is it ends up being redeveloped for its highest and best use, which is like a condominium or something like that, which is worth a lot more value. So we represent the B and C class building owners too, the ones that own smaller properties, some of them that own their own business and own that business property as well. And taking on a lot of big retrofits for them is also hard too. So across the gambit, we represent kind of cities who own a lot of properties, municipalities that, kind of government bodies, and then like kind of pension funds, investment funds. And then the third part is like kind of small mom and pop operations.
Great. Thanks a lot. That's helpful. So I think folks, if you're picking up on something here today, what I might offer is this: Local Power is a solutions-oriented campaign. We're trying to figure out the best path forward. And today we've got representation from the household level, up to the business community level, and then right up to the aspirational provincial level. And what we're trying to look at is offering solutions that stretch right from individuals through to First Nations communities and to businesses, to give them and help them find the tools they can use to take leadership in this area. So the first sort of round of discussion I'd like to break out today is about the decarbonization process across those levels here in BC. And just for you watching at home, just know that we're recording this, and we will be able to share this recording with you. Reminder to throw your questions in, and we'll get to them shortly. So the Local Power campaign has tried to remain as solutions oriented as possible. We know government hasn't lived up to its commitments, and actually they've been pretty poor examples in most cases. Despite bad policy, we've got actors at all levels demonstrating that we can move completely off fossil fuels today. So David, I'd like to return to you. You gave a pretty in-depth introduction. You've described how it's possible for households to get off fossil fuels. So what are the upsides that you've experienced as your family has gone through this process?
Yeah, well, I guess we're not having to spend a lot of time at the gas station, which is good. We're getting a check back from BC Hydro every year, which is also good. And I think that really we just have the feeling that we are contributing to local energy security. We've hired local businesses to do our energy upgrades and install our solar panels. And we feel that we're moving forward on a more sustainable path. I have friends who have been really inspirational to me, and who in fact helped design some of the aspects of our home. But they made a choice at some point that they were going to heat with wood and they were going to cook with propane. So they're living a low carbon lifestyle, but they are still dependent on the fossil fuel industry for some aspects of their life, and also burning 5 cords of wood every year. So we just really wanted to show that those things were not necessary, and that we can leave the trees standing, and that we can, in fact, we're all part of the problem, but there are opportunities for all of us to be part of the solution as well.
And do you have a sense of, if you were to factor together like all the people across BC heating with gas and all the people across BC driving fossil fuel powered vehicles, do you have a sense of the emissions picture collectively?
Well, no, I guess I don't really, but I do understand that if we were going to heat all of our homes with electric energy, whether it's in the form of heat pumps or other types of electricity, and we were going to power the majority of our transportation needs with electricity, we would need 100% more power than what we're currently producing in British Columbia, which would mean either inspiring and supporting local power initiatives, from community projects to individual homeowner and business projects, and rather than building another 5 disastrous Site Cs that we would need to make that up. So I think, opportunities are just sitting there waiting to be picked up by leaders and government, and I think that's part of what we're doing here, is trying to provide that inspiration and prompt those leaders.
I hear you. It's been widely reported that emissions from the built environment, so we're talking about all buildings across BC, account for approximately 40% of our emissions. And for sure, residential users of heating fuel would make up a portion of that. But I'd imagine that the largest component of that would come from the big buildings, like the office towers and the skating rinks and the schools and the shopping malls. Muneesh, can you walk us through what emissions are like in your sector? And if we're looking at things like fuel switching, what's motivating a building owner to make a switch off of fuel heat to an electric heat?
Thanks. Yeah, there's the big word is incentives. Is that a lot of people have been incentivized through different ways. Sometimes it's BC Hydro offering a good tool that they'll pay for, but to be honest, no one's going to do a $10 million or $1 million retrofit for a $100,000 incentive. But we have programs as BOMA that help people kind of get their footing into the environmental movement. One of the programs is called BOMA Best. And that provides a way for people to certify where they're at, find out where all their scores are, not just on carbon, but on waste, on air quality, on all these sorts of stuff that relate to buildings. So as they move from certified to bronze to gold to the platinum level, then we start to see examples of really big shifts that like malls have made, for instance. And sometimes it comes down to the very small things about sorting your own garbage and not letting the individual stores do that. Sometimes you have to put all sensors. But we kind of create the place to have those conversations and to share those ideas. Also, we work with the government to try and incentivize those things to help those who are trying to reach the top go further over their marks and to then show examples of how it's been done. But currently, it's a lot of people have it in their business plan to be a leader in this regard. So we provide those supports to those people, and most of our members are that way.
So am I accurate in assuming that most large buildings across BC heat with natural gas?
Yeah, but I think but natural gas is here and we all use it, for instance, like in malls or restaurants, in our homes, and it provides good steady heat. It's low carbon, even though it's still carbon. And it provides a good backup for when the electricity is down. So people are hesitant to get rid of it completely. And we have a big network already that's existing of pipes that we can use to help reduce our use. But yeah, everyone's looking at innovative ways to replace the equipment. What we have found is that forcing buildings to do whole building retrofits don't work as well as finding when those 25-year, 35-year, 45-year cycles of when the envelope or the mechanical system or the roof needs to be replaced, and then offering a target incentive at that point so that they do it in a way that creates a much bigger change.
And in your opinion, how possible is it for buildings to either move off gas onto electricity, or for a utility like Fortis to switch from offering gas as a fuel to something like hydrogen?
Yeah, Fortis has been talking about that, and there has been technological advances in that regard. But we don't, from my personal perspective, I don't like to support things that are going to be like absolute. Like, look how many gas stations we had everywhere for so long, but now we're trying to replace them all with charging. What if there's something else that comes out? What if we start to focus on ride sharing and drop-off zones and that sort of stuff? So we like to be more open about different technologies. But Fortis has been doing a lot to work on natural gas that is created through means that already exist, like the farm waste and that sort of stuff, and waste facilities. And you can buy credits to those. So they have a target of increasing those to a really high sustainable level so that our buildings can be purchasing that kind of gas instead.
Okay. And where I live in Courtenay, there's this whole strip mall complex in the south of town with acres and acres of flat roof spaces. What's the upside for, say, a mall owner like Cadillac Fairview to become a generator? Like, does it work right now, or do they need to be looking at things like municipalities to partner with them and enter into the utility market?
I think there's an opportunity. I, for one, believe that there's much more opportunity in solar power and stuff, maybe not here in Vancouver, but on buildings in general to give back to the grid. But even changing, like you said, fuel switching, there's some barriers that come by with the power supply that's locally available, and it often gets put onto the developers to take that on. Also with the individual power boxes, I forget the term that's used right now, but the individual power source at the building sometimes is not able to take on that change. So it's working with hydro and again, incentivizing it through the municipality if they want it, through individual districts or individual type of properties or whatever, to help them make it happen. But yeah, when these projects come on, there's additional costs into just making the feasibility studies, doing the energy audits, and then to finding out that you have to do all this other stuff because of that, and that doesn't defeat them. But then there's the additional problems of increasing the power supply around the building so that everyone's able to do it. And yeah, incentives work.
That's a good segue into power supply, because Dogwood's not the first organization to try to support a renewable energy trend. And the experience that many folks, and Marty can speak to this quite distinctly, the experience that many people face is a utility that's just not really encouraging the switch over to self-generation. So both of you, David and Muneesh, have discussed what fuel switching looks like. In my mind, that adds up to a bunch of new electricity that's required across BC. If we start seeing buildings switch over to electric, cars switch to electric, homes switch to electric, and replacing the 77% of fossil fuel energy that drives our economy, that adds up to a bunch more power. So Marty, I'd like to ask you, what would it mean? Why should new generation opportunities go to Indigenous communities like yours? If BC Hydro is looking ahead to a future where new power is required, why do you think it should come from an Indigenous community like Akam?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of what's happening throughout the other First Nations throughout the province. But at Akam here, we have a project ready, a shovel-ready project that we've been working on. We've gone through our environmental assessment process, our species at risk process. We've engaged with our community, and the community supports it. It's part of our community strategic plan. We have access to land here that's part of our reserve, but also surrounding our land base here that's set aside for our people, we have other places that other people are looking at to start or have solar energy development on it. So there's a big interest in this solar energy. Where our community, social economic and development go together. We have an untapped resource that we want to be part of the effort. That's our small contribution to climate change. We're looking at a partnership with Fortis. We have a letter of understanding with Fortis to invest in a 26 megawatt system, which would be the biggest solar energy project in Western Canada. And the benefits that it would bring to our community, our own source revenue. The thing that stops us from right now is the energy purchase agreement we're pursuing with the province. If we were to be able to have an energy purchase agreement, I think it would be a good investment in the future for our community. Own source revenue that we would use for our priorities of education, to invest in education and water and housing. These are things that many First Nations communities throughout Canada are, and it's the federal government's responsibility to work with First Nations to address these concerns. Water is a huge issue throughout First Nations communities. And so funding is a huge part of the equation that a lot of First Nations have to deal with. For us here, we have those problems of funding. So
in my slides, I quickly blazed through a slide about the Utilities Commission inquiry on Indigenous Utilities. So they've put forward recommendations for government to allow Indigenous communities access to the grid and to bring the standing offer program back and allow Indigenous generators to sell not only into their community, but use the wires to sell to members regardless of where they live across BC. Can you tell the audience a little bit about your territory in specifically and its relationship with BC Hydro? Just reminding the audience that the Columbia River generating system with BC Hydro produces most of the power we use here in BC. And when it was built in the 50s, it had a cost that many of us aren't aware of today. Marty, could you tell the audience a little bit about why it would be sort of just and correct for BC Hydro in particular to support generation coming from your territory?
Well, the Columbia River and the Kootenay River systems is part of the Tunuka land base. There are, I believe, 25 plus dams that have been built on these two river systems over the last 60 years. Our people have never really benefited from those projects, but we have had lots of impacts. It has flooded out our archaeology, our cultural sites. It's had an impact on wildlife migration. It's destroyed the salmon migration that used to sustain our people for thousands and thousands of years. It's had a huge impact on our food security and our food certainty. We have historic grievances that I have been working on to try to rectify with the province. The power lines that crisscross our country. I don't know if the audience knows, but 50% of the energy that is used in the province is generated from the facilities that have been built in the Amakastanucha. And the power line, the grid crisscrosses our country. And one of the main power lines goes right through Akam. And that's the place where we are proposing to build our solar energy project, right in the middle of our reserve. 200 plus acre parcel has been set aside. So for me, it's an opportunity for the province to reconcile the past and to partner and work with us to make things better for our people. I really believe that solar energy for our community will open the doors for the rest of the area and have a huge impact on the economy and the future.
Thanks for that, Marty. So needless to say, you welcome the Utilities Commission recommendations on Indigenous utilities, but it sounds like there's more that the government can do to actually encourage rather standing in the way. David, your group and your community suffered a setback at the Utilities Commission this past year when they overturned the net metering rate. If a fair price for home generation was offered, what do you think the result would be? Would more people take up solar?
I absolutely think so, and I would like to at least give credit to the previous Liberal government who first initiated the program with BC Hydro that made it very easy and very attractive for community and private solar generators to either offset their consumption or to in fact over-generate. At the time, a group of us were considering a community solar in the Couch, and we had some great locations picked out. We had support from local government, but at that moment in time, we weren't able to make a good financial case for it. Well, since then, solar panels have gotten so much more efficient. They've gotten so much more affordable that that opportunity would be very, very real and very attractive for people, either on a private investment scale, like people investing their life savings, as some of our friends have done, and community solar. The current regulations now are very discriminatory in that if you're not someone like myself who is blessed with the resources to build a home and design it in a way that I've got rooftops that face south and are at the right slope that I can put solar panels on. If you're somebody who lives in an apartment or lives in a trailer park or lives in a home that doesn't have good southern solar exposure, you're shut out of this opportunity altogether. So you can't do it. And it's not practical now because of BC Hydro's proposed slash in the net metering rate. They're planning on cutting it back by about 50% compared to what it was when I first signed on with my contract. So if they were just to pay a fair rate for the power that they would then sell to my neighbor at a considerable markup, then it would make a great business case for BC Hydro, and it would make a great business case for individuals and communities and businesses to invest in local power generation. So it's hard to imagine what it is that is driving the current government and policies for the BCUC to start closing that door instead of throwing it wide open for local community sustainable power.
Thanks, Dave. And we'll get to questions in a second, but I want to use this opportunity to segue off of net metering into what the next best hope for consumers who are looking to get involved in both renewable energy generation and resiliency retrofits. Muneesh, could you give us a plain language explanation on property assessed clean energy? What is it and why does it work well? And how does it help folks at home decarbonize?
Yeah, sorry. We believe that property size clean energy will allow people to take on whole building retrofits to achieve much larger carbon reduction targets than is what they would normally do. And doing this by stretching the repayment period over longer periods of the energy reduction time. So instead of having to fork over a whole bunch of money to like almost build a whole new house again, you can do targeted renovations that are meaningful, which don't break the bank currently. And in most cases, you start to see a reduction in energy use that meets or offsets that cost. So people can be cash flow positive right away. And for if that's a home, that means you have more for your expenses and your other bills and investing or whatnot. If it's a business, that means you can maybe put more into your business or hire more people or pay your other bills, that sort of stuff, instead of worrying about when it is you're going to sell this property to recuperate those benefits. And currently we pay property taxes. So the idea is to put this kind of payment onto some sort of a property tax plan that can either be supported publicly or privately or both, and slowly paid through the property taxes each year.
And what's the unique element to a PACE loan? What sets it apart from different loans that help people make investments in their property today?
I think PACE is used to go for like energy reduction stuff, primarily stuff that's going to make the buildings resilient for a long time. And I think that's a lot of what people believe in. And we're told in the community that we've been talking to through energy consumers and advocates that there's a lot of people who want to invest in this type of technology. Like it's easy to raise, $100 million or something like that. And we've also noticed there's lots of money available currently from the Canada Infrastructure Bank through other initiatives, carbon reduction initiatives to target this sort of stuff. So we believe it's like a win-win situation that we can help provide people to do what they can, and we can also help share good examples of how it's been done to further more projects.
Thanks. And for folks who don't know, PACE loans, when they become available, they'll be attached to your property, not your own personal credit situation. So you can take out a PACE loan, make an investment in your home, add a generation system, and if you decide to sell that home, that loan stays with the property. It's one of the most attractive features of PACE. So I'd love to take a break to answer some questions and invite Jamie in to pick a few out of the hat and task some of us on the panel with answering them. Again, thank you to everybody who took the time to join today. Let's hear a few questions.
Sure, Dave, there was a comment somebody asked about MLAs responding to questions about Site C. Might be hearing something about that this week, so if anybody wants to speak to that.
Okay, I'm guessing the question refers to some of the actions that Dogwood supporters took, contacting their MLAs, asking for them to stand up and ask for this project to be canceled. We've heard a rumor that the Premier has the report, the Milburn report, in his hands, and I would expect that a discussion would be happening at the cabinet table fairly shortly. So we've been told to expect a decision about Site C before Christmas. We'll just have to wait and see and keep an eye on rainy Fridays at 3 p.m. for an announcement.
Thanks, Dave. Something that didn't really come up quite yet is encouraging people to use conservation as a tool for energy savings. Does somebody want to speak to that?
I personally don't have a car anymore. That's been my contribution. I think I walk everywhere and take transit whenever I can. So that I'm able to do that. So that's kind of my part.
David, do you want to make a point?
Yeah, I would agree that the best first investment for energy conservation and sustainability is to improve what you've got and what you're doing. Ride your bike. I'm a big supporter of bikes and have joined a Rails to Trails organization. Certainly take public transit and do what you can with your existing building envelope, improved windows, improved insulation, all of those types of things. And certainly I have to, again, give credit to BC Hydro for the Clean BC program. There's wonderful incentives for replacing hot water tanks with heat pump hot water tanks, for replacing oil and gas furnaces with heat pumps and other energy savings alternatives. And I've taken advantage of some of those offerings. I found them to be very generous and very easy to take advantage of. So definitely reducing your own personal impact. There's lots of opportunities to do that for individuals and for, of course, businesses and corporate entities.
Okay, so 2 thumbs up for conservation. Jamie, what's next?
There has been quite a lively chat in the chat about natural gas. So what is the role of natural gas, if any, in new buildings?
Muneesh, looks like you've kicked over a hornet's nest with natural gas. I'll say that for my own opinion is that we shouldn't be building out any new natural gas infrastructure for heating anywhere. I know that I've had this discussion with the head of public relations at Fortis, who has indicated they're looking at hydrogen as a replacement, and even mentioned that a solar project like Marty's could be used to power an electrolyzer that could create green hydrogen that could be piped through networks and burned for heat. I'm sure there's a question about physics and the ability to heat a space like a building, but maybe Muneesh, you want to talk a little bit more about natural gas.
Yeah, sorry for lighting a fire there. Yeah, natural gas is currently in buildings. It's got a lot of use. But like I said, Fortis is looking at those technologies and we support them, and we try to get our members to support them as well. Regarding that specific, the science of using hydrogen, I'm not sure whether it works, what the pressure is on the current valve system and of pipes. I don't know. But like I said, they're looking at it and the experts are looking at it. We try to do what we can to make sure that, you know, the building is going to be as clean as it possibly can. But currently there's a great need for natural gas, and that's and especially as a backup if everything goes down, because that would be scary. And a lot of people, most of our members have people in their buildings. They want to keep them safe and healthy and to be accessible, and that's their primary concern. So there's currently a role still for natural gas, but there's a way to use that infrastructure to try and create new technologies. We're all for that.
And would you agree that going forward, new buildings shouldn't have natural gas heating?
Well, you know, that's a personal question regarding my members. They probably like to see the option. They like to see the flexibility currently, because, you know, they're not really sold on all the technologies and, you know, and the costs. But yeah, personally, I like to see more technologies. I'm a big fan of the zero buildings, and I like to see those residential buildings. But again, I said in one of the chats that there's a lot of municipal roadblocks that come in the way with architecture, with zoning, with requirements for different things in the buildings, right? Other things we want, daycares, all that sort of stuff. So that's what sometimes holds it up. But I support on the urban design panel, every time there's a new way they do use the buildings to create zero energy, I'm all for it.
Okay, great. We've got time for a couple more questions. Jamie, what have you got?
Sure, there's a question in the Q&A from Ken Boone, who lives in the path of the Site C Dam. He's asking about the benefits of net metering, even if you don't get extra money back from BC Hydro anymore.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of municipalities that are taking advantage of the net metering program. So I showed a slide of Central Saanich. They're hooked up to net metering. So they're still on the grid. They're still theoretically paying a hydro bill. However, they're expected to recover the cost of their installation via the savings in the net metering program within 12 years. So for sure, at the municipal level, there's the benefit of just offsetting your costs. And I think also for folks who are just dipping their toes into the residential solar market, adding a few panels on your house and connecting to the net metering program would be a way to make sure that you never climb into the sort of tier 2 rate. So you're always keeping your energy use at the lower tier 1 rate. That might be a second benefit. I might hand it over to David for any other comments.
You pretty much covered it there, Dave. Certainly most homes will not have unless they were purpose built to be sustainable or net zero, will not have the opportunity to completely eliminate their electrical consumption on a 12-month basis. Certainly they might exceed their needs in the summertime, but through the winter they won't finish with a balance. So they will be using the grid and the net metering system to, as you pointed out, offset their energy consumption. And of course, the best return on investment, as you pointed out, is to keep yourself in tier 1 as much as possible. But certainly net metering has got a huge role to play in reducing electrical consumption for businesses and residents, even though the vast majority of businesses and residents will not be in a position to be overproducers, like myself and Peter Nix and a few of the other members of the local power group and the carbon busters.
Thanks, David. All right, folks, I'm sorry to bring the Q&A to an end here. I'm sure there's lots of questions, but please email them into dave@dogwoodbc.ca. I'll make sure they get answered. We've only got a few minutes left in the panel. I'd like to take a look at the year ahead in local power. And I'm going to ask each of you, what's one thing the government could do in the sort of sector that you are representing today? What's one thing that they could do that would unlock change, and what would be the knock-on effect in your community? So if you could keep your answers to about a minute each. I'll start with you, Marty. What's one thing the government could do?
Well, the one thing they could do is give us an energy purchase agreement, invest in that energy purchase agreement, and not look at it as a handout, but more as an investment in our community and in the future for future generations. What was the other part of your question?
What would be the effect of that? Like, what's that going to mean for young people?
That would, that would provide us with funding, that we would use to invest in our education and our housing and our water to help us meet needs of our community.
Okay.
That's my short answer. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to participate in this venue, and I really appreciate everybody's participation, and it's really nice meeting the two other. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure to have you, and I'm sure it's been great for everyone to put a face to a name. David, over to you. What's one thing government could do?
It's dead easy, Dave. All they would have to do is return to the regime that was established by the previous Liberal government and allow community solar to move forward. That way, people who did not have the privilege that I have would be able to invest in community solar somewhere else in their community and reap the rewards of being a partner in a solar generation project. So it's dead easy as far as I'm concerned. All they have to do is just turn the dial back to where the Liberal government had previously set it, and this industry, this ability for people to be part of the solution moving forward would just explode in our communities, particularly since solar energy has become so much more efficient and so much more affordable. I just know that there's been a couple of people who have been addressing questions to me. My email is dslade@telus.net, and I would love to continue conversations and share my trials and tribulations of getting to net zero with anybody who is interested. So again, that's dslade@telus.net, and my thanks to all of the panelists and Dogwood and everybody who's come to join us today.
Man, that's very generous of you, David. Do you mind if we share your email out when we send recordings? Okay, great. And Muneesh, I'm going to couch this question because I know folks are curious about PACE. So you and I have been working together to try to bring about PACE legislation that would enable folks to invest in renewables and conservation and resiliency. So looking ahead, what could government do to make PACE a reality in this coming year?
Definitely, I think government should move on PACE, take the recommendations that have been provided by our group and others, and create a larger, meaningful program that will create larger and lasting change that we're looking for. But I have to say, I absolutely agree with David and Marty. I was in government when they were doing both those policies, the Ministry of Energy, Mines, Petroleum Resources, and Ministry of Aboriginal Relations and Reconciliation. Those are all great things we need to do right now, along with PACE, to make sure that everyone has a chance to do what they can do to contribute to our shared carbon reduction goals.
All right. Well, I really appreciate everyone taking the time. And I know on our next panel, we're going to have a couple female participants. So it's not just a manel, as they call them. We've got some interest from the Okanagan and some interest from Pender Island for future panelists. I really appreciate everybody's time. And I appreciate all the guests for taking the time to join our bubble on local power. And looking ahead, I'm energized for 2021. All these suggestions that our panelists have offered on getting that standing offer program back and opening the utilities market to Indigenous communities and restoring net metering and passing PACE. And I'll add canceling Site C and redirecting the resources to that list. It would be great if we could get all those things done and turn the corner on what has been a challenging year. Jamie, thank you very much for moderating today and keeping things on track. And I'll follow up with an email of the recording that you can share within your peer groups, and stay in touch with questions. And again, thanks so much, everybody, for your time today.
Compliments of the season, everyone.
Yes.
Very much.
I'm See you all later. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks very much. Bye.